Hello and welcome to Jason Q Citizen. It was a big show last night. The live version is out. You can see all of the chat. It's a 90-minute show. Very, very proud of the team here at the Q Citizen Factory. The news of tomorrow. Well, there is so much more news to report today, and we're going to get into that right now. Jim Jordan has subpoenaed tech CEOs. Susan Wojcicki resigns as YouTube CEO. Fetterman checks into hospital for depression. Grand jury says Trump witnesses may have lied. And Queensland Police have made an announcement on the train cop killers. So Jim Jordan's House panel issues subpoenas to tech CEOs for information on content moderation. That's right, House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan has sent subpoenas to the chief executives of 5 large US tech companies demanding information on how they moderate content on their online platforms. The queries are part of House Republicans' plans to scrutinise communications between the Biden administration and big technology social media companies to probe whether they amounted to the censorship of legitimate viewpoints on issues such as COVID-19 policy that ran counter to White House policy. Some of the tech companies said they were already working with the Judiciary Panel. We've started producing documents, are engaged with the committee and committed to working in good faith, said Kate Frischman, spokeswoman for Microsoft. Meta spokesman Andy Stone said the company, which owns Facebook and Instagram, has already begun producing documents in response to the committee's requests and will continue to do so moving forward. Reps for other companies that received the subpoenas didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. The committee didn't demand information from Twitter Incorporated, which was purchased by Elon Musk last year, and the article in the Wall Street Journal says that's because they are more friendly to conservative voices since its change in ownership, which is ironic because later in the same article they say, in a hearing last week in front of House Oversight Committee, former Twitter executives said they erred in limiting the reach of news articles about Hunter Biden ahead of the 2020 presidential election, but denied Republican assertions that they were political motivations involved. Well, of course they would do that. The looks on their faces tells an entirely different story, as we saw Yoel Roth, his jaw nearly dropped, and many other of the executives, including the legal counsel, were looking very, very nervous when Clay Higgins told them they'll be facing jail time. And in other news, John Fetterman has checked himself into hospital for depression. The freshman Democrat has suffered a series of health woes after a stroke last year. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman checked himself into Walter Reed National Military Medical Center to receive treatment for clinical depression, the second hospitalization for the freshman senator this month. The senator's chief of staff, Adam Gentleson, said Thursday that the Democratic lawmaker had experienced severe depression in recent weeks. Mr. Gentleson said that on Monday, the attending physician for Congress, Dr. Brian Monahan, recommended inpatient treatment. Mr. Fetterman checked himself into Walter Reed on Wednesday. Now, his wife, Giselle Fetterman, after what he has been through in the past year, there's probably no one who wanted to talk about his own health less than John. I'm so proud of him for asking for help and getting the care that he needs. And that accompanies the statement from Fetterman's office. Now, Giselle said, this is a difficult time for our family, so please respect our privacy. For us, the kids come first. Take care of yourselves. Hold your loved ones close. You are not alone. Now, this is Giselle Fetterman. She has been speculated, and this is where it gets really interesting, that as an undocumented migrant for over 15 years, that she would replace Fetterman as senator. This was something that was speculated and discussed behind closed doors for a long time. She seems to be much more appealing, of course, than Fetterman. And it's interesting in that sense that a man who is 53 years of age, suffered a debilitating stroke, was told that rest was the best way out, is now suffering on the other side, both in mental health and physical health, and it seems poised that Giselle Fetterman would be the perfect person, according to the Democrats, to take up the role to replace Fetterman if he can no longer go on with the job. This is very, very disturbing and makes an entire mockery of the whole point for the people that want to become residents and citizens of the United States, land of the free, home of the brave. It seems that it's not very much like that anymore. You don't have to be free or brave to be in the United States at the moment. You just have to walk in the front door and do whatever the government tells you that you have to. Now, in other news, Susan Wojcicki, let's call her that, the CEO of YouTube, has decided that she is stepping down. YouTube's CEO said Thursday she's stepping down, and Neil Mohan, the Chief Product Officer, will take the lead as the Senior Vice President and new head of YouTube. Wojcicki said she agreed with Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai to take on an advisory role across Alphabet and Google, which is very interesting given that she's been there for 25 years and said that now she's decided to step back from her role as the head of YouTube and start a new chapter focused on my family, health, and personal projects I'm passionate about. She said in a blog post. She's 54 and joined YouTube as the CEO way back in 2014. She'll continue working with YouTube teams, coaching members, and meeting with creators. Now, the part that we don't get told in all of this is that her departure comes at a time when YouTube is facing one of its most challenging periods since Google bought what was then a quirky video site facing widespread complaints about copyright infringement in 2006 for an announced price of $1.65 billion all stock. But YouTube's ad revenue during the final 6 months of last year dropped by 5%, and it's the first extended downturn that the video service has shown since Alphabet peeled back its financial curtain. Analysts are worried that the slump will continue this year, one of the reasons Alphabet's stock price has fallen by about 10% since it released its most recent quarterly reports 2 weeks ago. She's stepping down just days before the US Supreme Court is scheduled to hear oral arguments in a case threatening the freewheeling style that has long been one of YouTube's biggest advantages. The case stems from 2015 death of an American woman killed in Paris during an attack by Islamic State in an incident that spurred the victim's family to file a lawsuit alleging YouTube's algorithms aided the terror group's recruitment. If the court decides that tech companies can be held liable for material posted on their sites, the experts could not only destroy YouTube but shake up the entire internet. And that's why we're learning that while she's standing down, she gets passed to the side and picks up an advisory role. Of course she does, at Google and Alphabet companies. This is how it works in the big end of town. Wouldn't it be nice that you could step down as CEO and pick up half your income doing absolutely nothing and getting on with the rest of your life with personal matters and issues aside, and you don't even have to stand up as CEO of YouTube in front of the Supreme Court. That's just how it works. Now, interestingly, when it comes to court, a Georgia grand jury recommends perjury indictments in Trump election meddling probe. A Georgia grand jury said one or more witnesses in a criminal probe of former President Donald Trump may have lied under oath while testifying. The panel recommended that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis pursue indictments for perjury in these cases. Quite incredible. Now, also in Australian news, Queensland Police have announced this statement in relation to the cop killers, the trains. Intelligence staff have conducted a thorough assessment of the offenders involved to understand the motivation behind such extreme violence and whether there was a further threat to community safety. Deputy Commissioner Tracy Linford said in a full analysis of the evidentiary material indicated that the incident was a religiously motivated terrorist attack. Specialist teams have analysed an extensive amount of evidential material, including diaries, books and notes, located at the scene, phone messages, emails, social media posts, witness statements and body-worn camera footage, Deputy Commissioner Linford said. This information provides more clarity as to the motivation behind the incident than what was known in the days after the event. We know now that the offenders executed a religiously motivated terrorist attack. They were motivated by a Christian extremist ideology and subscribed to the broad Christian fundamentalist belief system known as premillennialism. The attack involved advanced planning and preparation against law enforcement. There has been no evidence to suggest anyone else was involved in executing the attack in Australia or that there is an ongoing specific threat. Let's have a look at what millennialism is described or defined in Britannica.com, the belief expressed in the book of Revelation to John, the last book of the New Testament, that Christ will establish a 1,000-year reign of the saints on earth, the millennium, before the last judgment. More broadly defined, it is a cross-cultural concept grounded in the expectation of a time of supernatural peace and abundance on earth. Millennialism offers a version of the fundamental eschatological belief that at the end of time, the end or end time, God will judge the living and the resurrected dead. Not quite sure how this is how the cop killers in Queensland could be acting as a result of being pre-millennial Christian fundamentalists. All of a sudden, Christianity, which has always believed in the resurrection of Christ in the book of Revelation, is now considered to be extremism. This is the police clutching at straws, and clearly Christianity is now a target amongst those who are seen to be the very last resisting the government tyranny of the day. And interestingly, in last night's show, we heard Jordan Peterson's talk about his new political movement, and he talks about government tyranny being, of course, the opposition of freedom. And it seems that religious freedoms are now being challenged in Australia as a result of 3 rogue killers. It's truly an extraordinary thing, but what we're seeing here is a one-size-fits-all hive-minded approach, as usual, being the format to encapture anyone who dares challenge the system. Free speech is dead, but whilst we can do it, and whilst Jim Jordan is fighting out of the United States to have these tech CEOs answer for their censorship and the First Amendment over there in the US, it's very, very important that we continue to spread the word all around the world. Now, it gets even crazier. Do you recall what this is? This is the Ohio cloud as a result of a train derailment in Ohio, letting out a vinyl chloride. One of the cars has been completely off limits. That's probably why that journalist was arrested for asking questions, and therefore the evidence is somehow missing. We didn't hear from any of the usual suspects, though. There were no protests, there was no Greta, there was no Biden, there was no AOC, there was no Al Gore. Where are the so-called environmentalists for East Palestine? Now, interestingly, the same people were out in force when this person, Leah Thomas, the swimmer, was out there winning gold medals, competing against women. And there was a lot of backlash in the community because it was deemed to be unfair. Well, what else has become unfair is this unbelievable story that's popped up this week. It's been tweeted by a fellow called Jake Shields. Straight men must date trans women to combat hate, say activists. This is absolutely incredible. You cannot make this stuff up. It is the most absurd story of the week. Activists now demanding that straight men date trans women to end hate, but straight women were not mentioned who they must date. Remember the fuss over swimmer Leah Thomas and how the entire government was involved in equality, gender identification, and subjective opinion becoming the norm. Meanwhile, the same pot stirrers were nowhere to be seen this week. Never mind, back to love. This, however, prompted me to ask, should the government arrange dating now?
Dating has become increasingly difficult in a world of equality. That is why the government is introducing a world-first dating service, called Ginder. This stands for Government-Induced Non-Disclosure Equitable Romance. Instead of leaving love to randoms, your government really loves you.
Well, that's it for me. It cannot get any more silly, can it? Believe in what you believe, make sense of what it is, and ask questions, more questions, and I'm happy to be able to answer them, cover the stories here on Jason Q Citizen. The Q is for questions, and you are allowed to ask them. Isn't it wonderful that we are able to regroup, rebadge, move on, and deliver the news that the mainstream is now covering, but in a way that only those that are paying attention can work out exactly what it really means. Check us out on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, Podbean for the audio podcasts, and now on Substack, jasonqcitizen.substack.com. Please like, please share, and I'll see you on the next show.